welcome to the Groundswell Shorts. I'm here at Groundswell in the UK, and I'm here with Nicolas Verschuere, COO and co-founder of Soil Capital. We've interviewed Chuck before, and I will definitely link that in the show notes below. He just gave a talk about the profitability of regenerative farming, and especially the profitability starting in year one, which is something we don't hear too much about. We usually hear the long transition phases, etc. So I'm very happy to check in with Nicolas and hear something about this talk. So first of all, Nicolas, thank you for making the time. And can you talk a bit about the concept behind the small talk you gave here on profitability in Regen Ag from year one?
Thank you, Koen. Yes, of course. Happy to explain you a little bit. I think that what I've tried to explain during the talk this morning was to share the experience that we have in our different projects of facing the necessity to transition farms into Regen Ag with a big constraint with it, which is the finance. And most of the time, farmers are not able to accept the fact that they will lose profitability for the first years, and they're very afraid of what we call the G curve. So where you're going to have to take a hit during 1 or 2 or 3 seasons for the benefit of the next season, and that's really something we try to study with the farmers and design together a way to avoid that. So that's I would say really sort of sweet spot where we at Soil Capital are trying to concentrate our expertise.
And can you explain in the talk you mentioned the gradual, because we can imagine the J curve. So for the audience, just imagine the J curve where we always see the investment at the beginning, then there's a period where the curve is going down, and at some point in terms of the time axis it comes up again. And you're saying, and you said actually in the talk, we want to start at the same point obviously and then slowly but gradually go up. Can you explain a bit what that means if it's my land as a farmer?
So I think that the main assumptions and the main point here is to try slowly. So there is a possibility to try to start in these techniques in a different way, slowly. A small part of your farm with an aggressive strategy, or very low aggressivity on all your farm. We generally we prefer the second option, and it's really by trying to minimize the risk at the beginning while implementing some techniques that you will enter in this change. And one of the first step that I would say 90% of the time we start with is the agrochemical. We understand that there is still quite some fat or some possibility to improve the agrochemical use, which represent a certain amount of money, and we are going for this low hanging fruit first, because of the capability to generate some money, but also because, of course, we understand that agrochemicals need to be properly managed if we talk about soil health, and while optimizing and saving some money with the agrochemicals, we reinvest part of this money in a more long-term or medium-term actions or changes. The second low-hanging fruit, I would say, possibility is the mechanization and the land, the tillage intensity, and this is also a very interesting area where, when you start understanding the cost of the tillage, the real cost, because people talk about fuel per hectare. This is not about fuel per hectare. It's a little part of the cost. There is the labor associated to that, the equipment, sometimes some overheads, and when you do the calculation, you will be always between 3 and 4 and 5 euro per hectare per centimeter of depth of land tillage, which is of course representing quite a lot of money if you can start managing that in a better way, decreasing the tillage intensity. So that's two levers where we are starting to work, and it creates a buffer. It creates some financial resources to start justifying investing, for example, in a cover crop, to investing in a crop that is not as profitable as other crops. So opening the rotation with more crop and different others techniques that are probably costing or requiring some investment.
So you're basically really looking from the first moment, making the assumption that it's not a perfectly efficient system that you're stepping into, and trying to look for those efficiencies and freeing up some cash to, first of all, increase profitability, and then use some of that as well to start investing slowly, gradually, and over years. Obviously, you're freeing up more cash, which means you can invest more, and slowly the rotation starts. Can you give an example on the Belgian farm or some of the Belgian farms you work with here in Europe, how that worked in practice?
So in Western Europe, it's quite simple and easy to explain. On the agrochemical side, for example, we are still, I would say, quite inefficient. The business model is still that the suppliers of those agrochemicals are the agronomists. And
which is an interesting thing. So the guy or girl selling you the stuff also advise you on the amount you should use and spray.
Yeah, on top of that, most of the time those agronomists are part of the local community, so it's there is a family link or some sort of quite sometimes tricky link and conflict of interest. So that's something that we're trying to address by just providing to the farmers independent advice, or providing to the farmers knowledge, training for him to be able to decide what he wants and what he doesn't want. And this is representing in general between 10, 30, 40% of savings on once the knowledge is there. There is another way to de-bottleneck also this point, is to try to put people together, farmers together, in order to access to better price. And it can sound very strange that regenerative farmers or soil capitalists trying to put people together to negotiate better price for pesticides, but it's actually an entry point. And when you can convince and demonstrate to a farmer that he will make savings, and this is a very easy one because it's you can check your bills, and you can that's something that the farmers know. The budget is not like soil health, and the value of soil health is much more difficult to value that. So when you value that, the farmers can definitely and safely understand that he can invest in some other practices that are not easy to really measure the payback or require some investment. So that would be the first the strategy we are using. And I think that another point that is interesting to understand is that while doing that, actually the mindset of the farmers is changing, and you're starting to see that actually what you believe is not always true, and that you can optimize, and that actually the results are good, and you're taking risks on your pesticides. You know that if there is a problem, there is always a chemical solution. So the risk is not completely, it's not a big risk, because if you see something wrong, this is always what I tell them. Okay, we'll come back with a bazooka if you like, and we will solve it. There is many solutions. So it's a controlled risk, but it's a journey where the farmers are understanding that there is something possible to change, and it's very it's very positive. And for me, this is really the start of the virtuous circle. And once the vision of the farmers change, when this virtuous circle starts, this is where you see this incremental and slow, the curve that is theoretically going very slowly to avoid the G curve, going faster. And I think that that's most of the time a good news, and the forecast that you were doing to the change is most of the time going faster because of that.
Yeah, you're basically getting them to as many farmers as possible to start, and a big chunk of them will actually accelerate over time and actually get hooked on soil improvements and actually go way further than we could have predicted at the beginning.
Right, and I think that of course it's we are talking here about this knowledge-based industry more than an input-based industry. I think that this change needs to happen. What is clear is that in our project we are working with small farmers in Belgium. In the case of Belgium that you were mentioning, in this case we need some tool to make this knowledge accessible to these small farmers. So we are creating now hubs in order to consolidate the need of the farmers and to have the possibility to hire agronomists and to buy sometimes some equipment to debottleneck and to make the farmers to have for them to have the possibility to step in incrementally.
I want to thank you so much, Nicolas, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you very much, Koen.